Welcome to ForexTV.com. Today is Friday, May 2nd. I'm Remy Hokie for New York Forex Market Buzz. In afternoon trade, the U.S. dollar is holding on to gains against the majors following the rally this morning. The April employment situation here in the U.S. was released and well received by the market. April non-farm payrolls came in better than expected, posting a decline of only 20,000 jobs. NFP for February and March were downwardly revised, with the March estimate of an 80,000 decline revised down 1,000, and February's decline of 76,000 jobs revised down by 7,000. And the April unemployment rate came in at 5% from 5.1% in March. U.S. equities are now trading mixed, pulling back from the advance seen at the opening bell. This afternoon, I'm joined by Nick Bennenbroek, Head of Currency Strategy at Wells Fargo here in New York. Good afternoon, Nick.
Good afternoon.
Happy Friday, and thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Well, as we head into the weekend, we're seeing a fairly optimistic reaction to the non-farm payrolls figure, and the Fed Reserve did reduce the Fed funds end discount rate earlier this week, with benchmark interest rates now at 2%. But Nick, while further gains for the dollar are expected and a correction in euro dollar, give us your fundamental assessment as well as technical forecast for euro dollar.
Well, I think for the euro-dollar rate, we could see some further slight fall. There are important technical levels. 153.40 stands out as a low that we saw in the past several weeks and almost challenged earlier today, for example. Fundamentally, though, while the numbers were not as bad as expected, it's hard to describe them as good. We still got a 20,000 fall in payrolls, and it was kind of surprising that we saw such strength in services employment, given what has been happening elsewhere with the economy. So I really think that the small fall in jobs that we saw was more of an anomaly, and that we probably will continue to see somewhat larger falls in employment in the coming months. And as a result, I think the dollar's probably going to remain on the defensive. I would suspect that we will actually see the dollar fall against most currencies, and the euro go back to 155 and 157.50, for example.
Well, Nick, while we weigh fundamentals as well as monetary policy, next Thursday, May 8th, we have both the BOE and ECB rate announcement. Overnight, we saw gains for the pound, which seemed to have been more due to a demand for the currency in the euro-sterling cross. So if you could give us your forecast for the sterling against both the euro as well as the U.S. currency going into the weekend.
Into the weekend, we're certainly looking for the sterling to remain relatively flat against the dollar. 197.50, for example, would be our view on both on a 3-month and 6-month basis. So we're really not seeing any particular moves. In terms of a range, into the weekend and into next week, we could trade as low as 197, perhaps as high as 199. And similarly, I think that we might see just a little bit of slippage in terms of that, or a little bit of gain, shall we say, in terms of the euro-sterling rate. That's currently just above the 78 pence level. We could see that get up to 78.50.
Okay, now let's move on to dollar-yen as well as the yen crosses. The yen has weakened against the U.S. currency as well as the euro in the North American session, with dollar-yen earlier surging to 105.69. Now, heading into next week, we do have the Golden Week holiday in Japan, so we'll continue to be seeing less liquidity. But technically, for euro-yen as well as dollar-yen, what's your near-term strategy?
I think that a lot's going to depend on where we end today. Certainly the 105 level in the dollar-yen rate is quite important. There seems to be a bit of a pivot around that. It was a previous low, and we broke above that today. Right now, I would suspect that if we close below that 105 level, we may actually see the dollar-yen give back a little bit more ground, so we see the yen just strengthening a little bit against the dollar. But as you say, I think with the Golden Week holiday and liquidity, perhaps something of an issue, sort of pays to be flexible as far as that currency is concerned next week.
Okay, now let's look at the dollar block currencies, especially the currencies of the Aussie and Kiwi dollar. Despite dollar gains in today's session, oil and gold are back up on the day. Next week is a big week for the Aussie dollar with the RBA as well as Q1 house price index data and employment data. So how do you see Aussie yen demand and other drivers weighing on the Aussie against the majors, including the Kiwi?
I think that the Aussie still remains relatively well supported, and we have got, as you mentioned, some employment figures and the RBA out next week. I don't see any change in rates in terms of the Reserve Bank of Australia. If we did get a big gain in jobs for the month of April, that would certainly help the Australian dollar as well. I suspect that the dollar whole zone perhaps strengthen a little bit against the US dollar, and I suspect that we might also see the Aussie yen rate move a little higher as well.
Okay, before we wrap it up and head into the weekend, we've highlighted the key fundamentals, but I'd like to ask your take on liquidity pressures. The Fed Reserve announced it was increasing funding to banks along with other central banks and would accept bonds backed by auto loans and credit cards. So what's your take on the latest move by the Fed?
I think that certainly there are still quite persistent and heavy pressures as far as the money markets are concerned. We see strains in terms of global rates in the UK, in Europe, and here in the United States as well. I continue to think that we're going to see lots of liquidity provision into the money markets for the time being.
Okay, Nick, thank you very much for insight and analysis, and have a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks. And this has been your Forex Market Buzz with Nick Bennenbroek, Head of Currency Strategy at Wells Fargo. I'm Remy Hoki. Join us later this afternoon, 4 p.m. exchange, right here on ForexTV.com.